Says I'm recording, so we're hot. So anybody says something, it's part of the program. Welcome to my world. Let's see. I gotta figure out the date right now.
Where you guys all sit together?
My day is Friday, October 11th, 2024 is my little Bible study. We're here at Humble Hearts. And guess what we're doing? We're starting a new book. Right? We just finished the book of Revelation, right? Yeah, well, with me, we may have finished the book, but we're never done with the book of Revelation. Let's just get used to it. You're going to hear more about it. All right. Now, last time we met, we talked about Elijah, right? And some of his adventures. By no means is the full scope of Elijah. But I wanted to focus on a couple things. One is his ascension. He was taken. He never suffered the flesh death. But the other thing was he already faced off with Baal and all these prophets before. Right. So and he knows all these things. Remember the sacrifice we talked about, what the daily sacrifice is. If you don't know the Old Testament law, what the daily oblation is, you have no idea what Elijah was doing. All right. And what was Elijah doing? He built an altar. He took 12 stones, one for each of the tribes. Built up an altar unto the Lord, not unto Baal. Right. He took that sacrifice that was left, even though they sacrificed a better sacrifice, is still unfit because the Baal priests had already laid their hands on it, so Elijah just set them up from the beginning. All right, they're pretty slick. But Elijah knows all this stuff that we're often deficient in, right? Well, let's just be honest about it. A lot of us in our Christian upbringing haven't had a lot to do with the book of Leviticus, the book of Numbers, the book of Deuteronomy, and just very limited scope even in the book of Genesis. All right, but the best way to defeat that is line by line, verse by verse, book by book. Just like we did the book of Revelation. Like I said, you don't have to agree with what I said about the book of Revelation, but you are in a very fine group who actually heard all of it, word for word. All right. So tonight we're going to start in the book of Exodus. Father, we ask this open eyes and open ears, no matter where they may be, in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. So now we're the other prophet. The reason we were chasing Elijah, because of remember where it is Malachi. It's the last book of the Old Testament and the last chapter of that book. So it's like the last thought in the Old Testament is the two prophets of the end times. Right? The name's Moses in the law and Elijah. Promises to send them back, right? Now we'll talk more about Moses as the things actually happen as Exodus unfolds. But so Elijah's definitely one of them by name. All right, and the book of Revelation identifies them not so much by name, but more by deed. All right, here we're going to pick it up in Exodus chapter 1, the story of Moses. You can't talk about the book of Exodus without talking about the man Moses. All right, so let's get this done. Now, these are the names of the children of Israel, which came into Egypt. Every man in his household came with Jacob. Now, we've already talked about these boys. Remember, we studied these 12 men, these tribes that they become. We've studied all the lineages that come out of Abraham. Some of that's going to pay off tonight, too, by the way. All right. Now, here they are. These are the sons of Jacob. Verse 2, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, which will become the priest line, Judah, which will become the king's line, Issachar, Zebulun, Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, all the souls which came out of the loins of Jacob for 70 souls, for Joseph was in Egypt already. If you know the story, the last part of the book of Genesis, Joseph gets what? Sold by his brothers into Egypt. All right, it ends up being a blessing before it's all over. All right, but he's already there. It's because he's already there and he's blessed by God in God's house there. He's working and he ends up, when these boys show up hungry, all right, he's already running things for Pharaoh, even though he's a Hebrew slave. And that's not just something that went on in Pharaoh's house. Every place that Jacob was, if you remember, he was sold first into Potiphar's house, right? There's a couple of stops. He ends up in prison, then in Potiphar's house. Yeah, he's running stuff in prison, and in Potiphar's house, and then he ends up running stuff in Pharaoh's household. That means it's running everything for the world, basically, at the time. All right. Verse 6, and Joseph died, and all his brethren, and all that generation, and the children of Israel were fruitful, and increased abundantly, and multiplied, and waxed exceedingly mighty, and the land was filled with them. And ends up, this is what they're afraid of. Pharaoh's afraid of this very thing. All right. Now that goes from what? 70, they said 70 people, right? 400 years later is what we're talking about. Best estimate for their population at this time is right around 3 or 4 million people. All right, that's women, children, old, everything in the mix factored into it. So that's a big increase over 400 years, exactly like it says. All right. Now they go into Egypt, friends of Pharaoh, if you remember the book of Genesis. All right, they're welcomed into Egypt by Pharaoh, right? Because Joseph was already there. 400 years later, though, nobody remembers who Joseph is. All right, and the Hebrew people are now slaves. A multitudinous bunch, it sounds like. Verse 8. And there rose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. And he said unto his people, Behold, the people of the children of Israel were more and mightier than we. They're doing so good. God is blessing them, but he didn't send them to Egypt as a punishment. They weren't being punished when they went to Egypt. They were going there to be saved because he'd already set Joseph up and told them about the famine and everything that was going on. So this imprisonment doesn't start out as a punishment, but it ends up being one. But it ends up being a big thorn in their side. Verse 10. Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply, and it come to pass that when there falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies and fight against us. All right? So get them up and out of the land. And I find that the irony of this is funny. All right? Because here they're saying, please leave. There's too many, but something gets messed up in the way and they end up getting kept, right? And you're going to find out what God has to say about it as we go. Verse 11, Therefore, they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens, and they built for Pharaoh treasured cities, Pimmoth and Ramesses. All right, now we were looking at these earlier when we come in. This right here, this is an archaeological excavation of Pimmoth. All right, I find it interesting in the archaeology that you're seeing, actually, how arched it all is. It's one of the very earlier ones, and it's one of the ones actually named in the Bible that we actually know where it is. This right here is one of the finds there at Pimmoth, and it just shows some of the trade that had to have been going on. This is either a wine jug or an olive oil jug or something like that, but that size was known, and just goes to show you how rich and actually plentiful the region was during the time, right? One of these days we'll do Genesis. You'll see a lot of archaeology stuff. All right. Okay, so those are the two cities they met. Now, what are they doing there? All right, listen to what it says. But the more they afflicted them, this is funny. The more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew, and they were grieved because of the children of Israel. The thing that they're fearing is how many there were. So the more they hammer them, all right, the more children they end up having. And you get to kind of thinking about what's going on. There's some pretty physical work here, right, that's going on. And now, if you're physically working really hard, but you're still getting enough to eat, and you're getting a good place to sleep, next thing, what usually ends up falling out is children. Yeah. Right. Nice and settled in, you're getting comfortable, you're getting plenty of food, you're working hard, but you're eating good. All right? They had a pretty good little relationship for a while. Now, that's what the rest of it says, but the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied. All right, verse 13, And the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with rigor, and they made their lives bitter with hard bondage, and mortar and brick, and in all manner of services in the field. And all their service wherein they made them serve was with rigor. They're working them pretty hard. But yet they just keep multiplying. Why? Because it's God's plan. Who's he building? He's building the nation of Israel. We got them 12, remember them 12 tribes? How many times we walked through this? Them 12 tribes. It doesn't go anywhere. They're all the way in the next heaven and earth age. Get used to hearing their names now. All right? Because they're you. All right? And you and your brothers and your sisters and everybody you've ever cared about. That's who those are. These names that we named at the beginning of this book. You stand in the fulfilled prophecy of the Word of God. All right? Verse 15. And the king of Egypt spake to the Hebrew midwives, of which the name of one was Siphrah, and the name of the other Puah. All right? These women, we're going to find out, well, let's look at their names. The first one, let's see. It's 8236, all right, the Sifra. It comes from 8235 in your Strongs. If you don't know what I'm using the Strong's Concordance. And we're just looking up the English word in the Hebrew language, since we're in the Old Testament, all right? This is Strong's Concordance, all right? Anyway, it means brightness, and that's as far as we're going to take it, or garnish. Well, the other woman means the same thing, to glisten. All right, so both of these midwives, their names mean the same thing. One's bright, the other one's glistening, pretty much the same thing. I think that's what God thinks of them, because listen to what he said. Verse 16, he said, when you go to the office of midwives to the Hebrew women and see them upon the stools, if it be a son, then you shall kill them. But if it be a daughter, then they shall live. That's a pretty rough order coming out, all right? And what do these women say? And the king of Egypt called for the midwives and said unto them, why have ye done this thing? What did I miss? Oh, I missed something. Hold on. Okay. All right, go back to 17. But the midwives feared God. Now that's what it is. They feared God. They knew Pharaoh could kill them, but somehow they still feared God more. All right? But the midwives feared God and did not as the king commanded them, but saved the men children alive. And the king of Egypt called for the midwives and said unto them, why have ye done this thing? And have saved the men children alive. All right, now, he's putting them on the spot. All right? We're in 18, all right? Their head's on the block. How they answer this man determines whether they even see tomorrow. All right? Well, there's a wise person. These women are wise. Listen to what it says. And the king of Egypt called to the midwives and said to them, when ye have done this thing, verse 19, and the midwives said unto Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not as the Egyptian women. They've been working pretty hard, right? All right, they're not as Egyptian, for they are lively and are delivered ere the midwives come in unto them. All right, so apparently they've actually put the call out. Don't call us when you're having a baby. Make sure you deliver before you call us. All right, so they're being smart, all right? Therefore God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and waxed very mighty. And it came to pass, because the midwives feared God, that he made them houses. And Pharaoh charged all of his people, saying, every son that is born ye shall cast into the river, and every daughter ye shall save alive. So Pharaoh's not getting up. He's not done. I mean, but God, these two women, you can't get over how brave these two women are. All right? They looked right at Pharaoh and refused to do what he wanted, no matter what. All right? That's a big witness for you guys, for us. All right? Now let's go to chapter 2. Let's see if I can find it. Exodus chapter 2. There it is. All right, now we're going to get into Moses. All right. Now here's where some of this stuff from the early part of Genesis and our studies with the book with the 12 tribes actually start to pay off a little bit. Listen to what it says. Chapter 2, verse 1. And there went a man of the house of Levi and took to wife a daughter of Levi. All right? Levi is one of those 12 tribes, right? This is what we will become the priest line. Right now it's nothing. It's just one of the tribes, but it will become eventually the priest line. All right? So this kid that comes out of here is what? Full-blood Levi, right out of his tribe, right from the jump. Now, I find it interesting, before Levi gets claimed, God first claims the firstborn of Israel when they walk out. And he trades them later for the tribe of Levi. Now, just if you want to do all the math, that's all in the book of Numbers. If you really want to do the math, we owe God 8 priests still from that swap. There wasn't quite enough for the tribe of Levi to cover all the firstborn of Israel. Where are they? I know God does math real well. So I just think somewhere along the line he's going to use, think about how many descendants, that's his sons and all those sons through time, right? So that adds up to a lot over a few thousand years. Just food for thought. It don't mean anything from nothing. All right, just something to think about. All right, but nonetheless, and the woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw him, that he was a goodly child, she hid him 3 months. All right, kind of gutsy move, right? Mom will do anything for them babies. All right. Right. Do anything. And she, against her own life, hid this little boy. Goodly one. Good little boy, right? One of the sons of Levi, 100%. All right, verse 3. And when she come not long, and when she could no longer hide him, she took him in an ark of bulrushes and dabbed it with slime and with pitch and put the child therein, and she laid it in the flags by the river's brink. All right, now, let's think about this a little bit. The Pharaoh's house had their daily ritual that they would do, all right? Now, later on, you'll find Moses running into Pharaoh down at the river in the morning because Pharaoh always went down to the river in the morning. All right. Miriam is the sister of Moses, and her mom know what they're doing. These are smart women. All right. They may be slaves, but, buddy, they're pretty stinking sharp because they survived in their household in 400 years of captivity in Egypt. They are not stupid. They know what they're doing. And they know that the best chance for this kid is to put him someplace that he'll get picked up as in Pharaoh's household. All right. Now, when you're working for God and you're doing what God wants you to do, I want you to keep Moses in mind because the rest of the story will tell you exactly how tight God holds you. Listen to what it says. All right. Verse 4, and his sister stood afar off, to wit, what would be done with him, just to see. This is Miriam, all right? Now, Miriam is one of the women that are named in the Bible as a prophetess, so keep that in mind. All right? And she, just like her brothers, a full-blood Levite, just a female. All right? And if you don't think God uses women to prophesy, you need to sharpen up in your book a little bit. All right? And I know there's a lot of people that teach different, but you're not going to hear it from me. And I'll flat show you where it's different. All right? But nonetheless, and he's using these women just the same. And the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river, and her maids walked along by the riverside. And when she saw the ark among the flags, she sent her maid to fetch it. It said, Miriam and Miriam's mom, Moses' mother, knew exactly what they're doing when they set this up. All right. Verse 6, and when she had opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the babe wept. And she had compassion on him, and said, this is one of the Hebrews' children. All right, so she knows exactly who Moses is. It's not being hidden in Pharaoh's house. All right, but yet the commandment to kill all these boys has already went out twice. All right, so now it just gets a little bit better. And said to his sister, this is Pharaoh's daughter talking to Moses' sister. All right? And then said his sister to Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and call thee a nurse for the Hebrew woman, a nurse of the Hebrew women, and she shall nurse the child for thee. This is Moses' sister. Who do you think she's going to go get? Need a wet nurse for Moses? That's what it says. And then said his sister to Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and call to the nurse of the Hebrew women, and she may nurse the child? And Pharaoh's daughter said unto her, go. And the maid went and called the child's mother. Well, I'll be dang, what do you know? You got Moses embedded in Pharaoh's home, being taught by his sister, a prophetess, while being nursed by his own biological mother, in a land where the order for him to go out has went out twice for him to die. All right, now you tell me, because this is a big example of what it means to walk in the last days when the Antichrist appears. All right, so you want an example? Here you got it. All right. Now, Pharaoh's dad. Let's see where I was. 9. All right, good. Yeah, I'm glad you guys pay attention for me because I'll get lost. I get excited and forget to read. All right. And Pharaoh's daughter said unto her, take the child away and nurse it for me, and I will give thee thy wages. And the woman took the child. Moses' mom took Moses, all right, and nursed it. All right. And the child grew, and she brought him unto Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son, and she called his name Moses. And she said, because I drew him out of the water. Now, this sets up the rest of the book of Exodus. Now, Moses is an interesting word because it appears in two languages, right? You have the Egyptian tell Moses, you have the Hebrew tell of Moses. In Hebrew, Moses means drawn from the water. All right. But in Hebrew, or excuse me, in Egyptian, in ancient Egyptian, it means something different. All right. You've heard it. Yeah, you ever watch some special on TV and you hear the word Moses out of Egypt? All right. Yes. Moses in Egyptian, ancient Egyptian, means son of. And Moses was son of Tut. That was what his name was. All right. But Moses is going to lose favor with Egypt. And he's going to go away for 40 years, and when he comes back, well, some of the Egyptian people probably still remembered him. All right. So when they said his name in Egyptian, it wasn't he who was drawn from the water, it was son of. And it was son of the one that they wouldn't say because he put out the order to have him killed. All right. So you see his name has a duality in that time. When the Egyptians said Moses, they knew who it was. That's the son of. It was the son of Pharaoh. But it's not anymore. And then for the Hebrew people, that's his hero, drawn from the water. But nonetheless, both cultures identified very readily who Moses was. All right, even at this time. Now, here's where it starts to pay off, that work that we did with the tribes, all right? Abraham. Let's go all the way back to Abraham. Abraham had, you remember how many wives Abraham has? 3, right? Has Sarah, Hagar, and then another one. All right, and it's this one that we need to Keturah. The Keturah is the one where we don't hear too much about. All right, but if you remember, I told you when we went through this, what it says in Genesis chapter 25, verse 1. And again, Abraham took a wife. This is after Sarah died and after he separates from Hagar. If you remember, like I told you, when we talked about her, I said, you can call that a divorce, because that's really what it was. All right, and Abraham took a wife, and her name was Keturah, and she bare him Zimram, Jokshan, Midian, Isbak, and Shihah. All right, now, Midian is one we're going to focus on. All right, I told you that Midian and Midian are two important ones to keep the lineage straight that Moses is marrying, right, when he goes away. All right, so let's keep that in mind. All right. Let's pick it up, chapter 2, verse 11. And it came to pass in those days, when Moses was grown, that he went out unto his brethren and looked on their burdens. And he spied an Egyptian spiting a Hebrew, one of his own people. He knows who he is. I mean, the whole time his mama's been nursing him and his sister's been playing with him, been telling Moses exactly who he is. Right, so when he sees one of his people being wronged, it hurts him. It moves him violently, apparently. Listen to what it says. And he looked this way and that way, and when he saw that there was no man, he slew the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. Well, Moses threw some lines. Sound like it, right? Now, like with most secret things, there's always somebody that's going to see you, right? You don't get too many secrets, it seems like, in life. And anything you think is secret, well, you've got one that looks around and knows all your secrets. And that's the one you better keep in mind. All right. Him saying, verse 13. And when he went out the second day, behold, 2 men of the Hebrews strove together. And he said unto them that did the wrong, where smitest thou thy fellow? Moses knows somebody saw. Because he's flat telling him, why did you hit him? Why did you kill him? All right. And he said, who made thee a prince and a judge over us? He's pulling rank. He is in Pharaoh's house. Shut up, slave. I'm working in Pharaoh's house. All right. But I ain't going to get him too far. All right. Intendest thou to kill me as thou killest the Egyptian? And Moses feared and said, surely this thing's known. Sure enough, it was, right? And now when Pharaoh heard these things, he sought to slay Moses, but Moses fled the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian. And he sat down by a well. This is one of the wells that Jacob's bunch would have dug, right? All right, so Midian, again, one of the sons of Abraham and Keturah. Remember, they're living in a strange land, but this is still that lineage that we were talking about coming out of Abraham that was forming all these nations, right? Well, Midian is one of them. Midian and Midian are 2 of them. All right. Now, the priests of Midian had 7 daughters. Remember that number? 7, spiritual completeness. And they came and drew water and filled their troughs to water their father's flocks. All right? And the shepherds came and drove them away. All right? So they set up, these women, they set up and started working. All right, here come these goofballs up out of the hills with their sheep, and they just going to run these girls off the water that they've already spent all this time digging up out of a well. All right? Well, Moses don't like it. All right? I forgot where I dwelt. Yeah, 17. And the shepherds came and drove them away, but Moses stood up and helped them and watered their flocks. And when they came to Reuel, their father, he said, "How is it that ye are come in so soon today?" All right. What he's really at, this guy's a shepherd. And what he's wanting to know, he's asking his girls, "Why are you bringing the sheep in? Where's the sheep? They need to be in the field eating. That's how you keep fat on your sheep. That's how you keep them having babies and keep them going." And they're bringing them in early, and he knows it's early. All right. So this must have been a scene that has been unfolded more than once. It's probably a daily thing. They come and draw the water. These goofballs come rolling out of the hills, run them off, and then they got to draw water, and they come in much later. Well, today it's a little bit different. Well, they had somebody helping them. All right. Now, this name Reuel, you're going to hear people swear up and down that Moses' father's name's Jethro. Yeah, that's what Moses called him. But Jethro just means like your excellency or your honor or your eminence, or it's an official title. His name's Reuel. Now, Reuel is an interesting one, all right? And it means friend of God. But if you get to chasing it around, it's a little bit more than that. It's like the shepherd man who is befriended by the Almighty. I mean, there's a lot more than just friend of God when you really get to chasing it around. I didn't see a lot to chase both sides of that around. So if you want to have some fun, there you go with the Strongs, all right? But nonetheless, that's what his name means, is friend of God. Now, most of the time, this is 1 or 2 times that I know of that his actual name is used, and the rest of the time, Moses refers to him as Jethro. And he's just showing respect to his father-in-law, all right? And that's what that's all about. Because Reuel had his own title. He's a chief priest of Midian. He's in a nation that was established by Abraham's lineage. He knows exactly where he's at. All right? Verse 19, and they said, "An Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds, and also drew water enough for us and watered the flocks." So he's identifying this dude as an Egyptian. Don't know who it is yet. Why? Well, he grew up in Pharaoh's household. He looks Egyptian. He dresses Egyptian. He speaks Egyptian. All right, fluently. Probably both languages, I'm sure. All right. And he said unto his daughters, "And where is he? Or why is it that ye have left the man? Call him, that he may eat bread." And Moses was content to dwell with the man. And he gave Moses Zipporah, his daughter, and she bare him a son. And he called his name Gershom, for he said, "I have been a stranger in a strange land." And that's exactly what Gershom means when you go running it down. All right, a stranger in a strange land. Okay? Verse 23, and it came to pass in the process of time that the king of Egypt died, and the children of Israel sighed by reason of their bondage, and they cried. And they cried, and their cry came up unto God by reason of the bondage, and God heard their groanings, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham and with Isaac and with Jacob. All right, their time's up. All right, and God looked upon the children of Israel, and God had respect unto them. All right, that gets us through the first 2 chapters of the book of Exodus. That's where we're going to stop tonight. All right, how we doing on time? Just a little bit? All right, anybody got any questions? I like questions. This is your time right now, anything. It don't have to be about, it doesn't have to be about the book of Exodus. It's anything biblical. Anybody? Nobody ever had a question in their life about the Bible? I would encourage you to have more questions. All right, then you guys, that's it. We'll catch you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel.